All right, to continue the horror theme for the month, we figured we'd go into remake territory because,
Hmm.
you know, that's a pretty big portion of the horror genre anymore and has been for some time.
Hmm.
And with these in particular, I haven't talked about the original Amityville, but I did talk about the original Omen. I did it as a versus with The Exorcist, like way back in the day.
Oh.
I
Do
figure
you
we'll
know?
kind
Do you know
of,
what I thought of yesterday? Actually, do you know what had also been a really good versus? The original Amityville versus The Shining. They're both stories about father figures being possessed by the place they live.
and axes get involved.
Yeah,
There's even a scene in the original Amityville where he's chopping down the door, going after them, and it's like it's weird to think that it was the year before Kubrick's movie.
yeah, and they came out around the same time.
If I remember correctly, isn't it? It's not even an axe in The Shining's book.
No,
Like,
it's a croquet mallet.
yeah.
Hmm. I can't believe I remembered that.
Have you seen either the original Amityville or the original? You've seen the original one because I think we watched it once.
Maybe I don't remember.
Like on an old movie channel, we might have watched part of it.
Mm,
But have you you haven't seen the original Amityville?
no, that's the James Brolin one, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
So I'll kind of reference the originals here and there to talk about how they
Man,
compare as far as
I wonder why when they did the remake, like, not that I mind Ryan Reynolds, but like maybe he wasn't quite big enough yet. The opportunity would have been there to have both Amityvilles be the Brolins,
yeah.
because Josh Brolin would be really good in that too. Because like we talked about last video, Josh Brolin is boring because he's just good in everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that was like a whole topic in the last video.
Yeah. That should be a video in itself where we just highlight Josh Brolin's career and how boring it is that he's picked for things because we know he's going to knock it out of the park.
Yeah. See, I figure I'll just kind of touch every now and then on how they each work or don't work as like an adaptation of their previous one.
Okay.
But overall, we'll talk about the movies themselves. What is your position on remakes in general? Because obviously it's a very common stance to just automatically be anti-remake no matter what, which is, I mean, I get it, but it's kind of
I My stance on remakes is if it's a good movie, leave it alone. Remake some of the bad ones. Try
yeah.
to make those better.
Of course, from a production standpoint, it is kind of logical to where it's like if a movie already has the reputation of being bad, would you be able to sell a remake of it, even if you made a significantly better version?
I think it would depend on your marketing and advertising, honestly.
Yeah,
I mean, you put together a good trailer, you can get anybody hyped for anything. Especially since today's generation, if you remake a bad movie from like the 70s, most of your movie going generation today aren't going to know what the fuck it was.
yeah,
You don't even have to label it as a remake. Just remake that movie, give it a different name, and then you don't have the stigma of the old movie. But people watching will clearly go, oh, this movie's this.
yeah. At most, you'll have in the credits it'll say based on the screenplay by the original writer, but
Yeah, like a
hardly
Departed
anybody.
Infernal Affairs kind of situation.
Yeah, which hardly anybody pays attention to anyway. So
Yeah.
I heard about a guy, like there was a guy on a forum a while back that said that he was surprised to learn that Split was M. Night Shyamalan after he had watched it, and it was like, wow, people just do not watch opening credits even when they're right in your face.
Yeah.
So yeah, because I've mentioned this plenty of times in other videos, but just for the sake of this, I've never been like anti-remake. Like when people get really bent out of shape when they learn that something is being remade, it's like the original's not going anywhere, so why put all the energy into getting angry about its existence?
Plus, I think there's movies that you have to label as untouchables. Like for me, for me, and the director agrees, Back to the Future is untouchable.
Yeah. Yeah, there's definitely ones where like things have been remade that were just never gonna work. Like obviously it's a remake in itself of a silent movie, but like the Jack Houston remake of Ben-Hur. Like
Hmm.
who was that for and why? I was just discussing with a friend the other day, Spike Lee's Old Boy.
Hmm.
And it's like who are those made for? Like
Was it Brolin an old boy?
yeah.
He's back.
So but yeah, overall, I'm like I don't immediately hate a remake just for existing going into it. It has to like prove that it sucks before I get too bent out of shape. But like I said, some things are sacred enough that I understand if people just hate the concept in general. But sometimes you get some of the shit we've talked about that just comes and goes, and you really just never hear about it again, so it doesn't matter. But then sometimes you get The Departed, or you get the Coen Brothers' True Grit, or something like that.
Yeah. I'm a big fan too of reimaginings. Like when especially since we're on October, when I think of reimaginings, like I'm not talking about like, well, I mean, I guess I am referring to like Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland or whatever, but I think the big success story out of reimaginings for me, where both movies still come out looking great, is Bela Lugosi's Dracula and Gary Oldman's Dracula.
Yeah. There's something else in that regard, but I'm going to save it because I'm going to talk about it in the last video we're doing this month.
Oh, okay.
But it's something very much in line with that.
Okay.
And there's something else I was going to say, but I don't know. But yeah, basically, I feel like the whole concept of remakes is a bit more complex than people give it credit for in regards to the ones we have that work and the ones we have that don't and just disappear. And then there's obviously a lot that aren't even horror related that a lot of people don't even realize. Like the Maltese Falcon is like the third version of that story on film.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously these have a pretty clear-cut, two clear-cut originals from the 70s.
Am I thinking incorrectly, or is there a remake of a Jimmy Stewart movie starring Jimmy Stewart?
It's he's not in them both, but it's The Man Who Knew Too Much, and Hitchcock made both of them.
Okay, that's what I was thinking of.
Which
Now, I don't mind, like, I don't mind if a director wants to take another go at their work. Is that the only time that's ever happened?
no, there's another big example, and it's on the tip of my tongue, and I'm drawing a blank right now.
Mm.
Haneke with Funny Games.
Ah, okay.
So
But at
yeah,
least it made sense though, because isn't the original one like Finnish or Swedish or something?
yeah. The thing I was gonna say, I got to grab it before it goes away again. What I was gonna mention that I forgot was the remake of Suspiria,
Ah,
where they did the thing where it's technically a remake, but there's hardly anything at all that resembles the original. It's just more of all he did was take inspiration,
mm-hmm.
and you got like the vague same plot, but other than that, like everything, it just went on its completely own different thing. It's like an hour longer, and it's
So
and
would
it's
you
like
I would qualify that as a reimagining.
yeah, that's where I was gonna bring that up, and then I lost it. So I figured we'd start with Amityville,
Okay.
which leads me to another question because I just asked you what's your position on remakes.
Mm-hmm.
What's your position on really, really big quotes here? True story horror. Do you think it's in poor taste? Is my first question, I guess.
It doesn't really add anything for me.
Yeah, because it's one of those cases where you just kind of, really in any case, but especially horror, as soon as you see based on a true story, you know it's full of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't doubt that the Lutzes had a weird experience in a house where murders happened. It's because it's also kind of the case of where you hear about the stories where on the movie set itself, like when they were making the movie, weird occurrences happen, like all the stuff with The Exorcist. And I think Melissa George said quite a few weird things happened here. Like people were actually waking up at 3:15 while they were making the movie and shit like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I feel like a lot of those stories are probably exaggerated in the sense of like, because yeah, like having to actually embody and tell a story like this is gonna have like a heightened creep factor to it that might influence how you're like perceiving things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and there's just weird coincidences that happen, but a lot of it just feels really exaggerated whenever you hear stuff like, because I feel like almost every horror movie, or at least paranormal movie that's ever been made, you have some actor or some crew member saying like, oh man, like the weirdest, almost paranormal like shit was happening on the set. And it's like, it goes with like every movie, and it's, yeah.
I'm in the camp that thinks that that's just part of the marketing for it.
Yeah, that could be too. Now, because we're being so skeptical and kind of brushing that off, if this were a horror movie, we would be the first ones to go.
Probably.
So yeah, and I also wonder if this one is particularly in poor taste. And not, I mean, yeah, there's the book and then there's the 79 movie, but this 2005 movie especially feels like it could be considered in poor taste because of its portrayal of the actual DeFeo murders.
Mm-hmm.
It's like that was actually real. Jody is fictional, thank God, after this movie.
Yeah.
But it's like, imagine if Jody was real. I mean, because obviously the whole event still happened.
Mm-hmm.
Now imagine if, like, and I don't want to dwell on this too much because there's a lot of other things in the movie to talk about. But I don't want to feel like I'm hating it right out of the gate or anything. But imagine if Jodie DeFeo was a real person and you had the scene in this movie where she, like, sticks the finger in the bullet hole. Does that just feel fucking gross?
Yeah, I would say so.
So, yeah, but I mean, so even though they got to dance around it by adding a fictional character and stuff like that, it still feels weird and kind of exploitive, especially since there's like fucking 25 Amityville movies, 22 of which are fucking straight to video.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all, and I guess George Lutz there was a whole lot of lawsuits involved in the book and the original movie, and I guess George Lutz was in the process of suing this movie when he died, because the whole thing of like, yeah, it's one thing to show it and like portray it as like he was possessed and stuff like that, because I'm not 100% known on the details of the case itself.
Mm-hmm.
But the stuff they added to this one, like when he kills the dog and when he builds them coffins, it was what he had a problem with. Now, like, as far as on the other side of that, if you're just looking at it as a fictional movie, it is genuinely creepy that he was like building them coffins and putting their names on them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like as a horror movie, as a scene in a horror movie, that's effective.
Mm-hmm.
But I totally get why one would be, because it's still his name. So it's.
Yeah. Do you know what's interesting to me? How, like, the building the coffin thing, that's been portrayed in a couple movies. I think it's so funny or so interesting that scene has been played for both super creepiness factor and comedy.
Yeah.
Is that one of the most versatile, like, little tropes that we have?
It could be. It could be. Oh, and a funny thing about him killing the dog is, to give this movie the benefit of the doubt,
Mm-hmm.
I do wonder if it was like an intentional way to throw off the audience or like intentional irony, because obviously the dog survived in real life, but specifically in the 79 movie, the dog saves his life at the end. So I wonder if it was almost like an intentional bit of irony of sorts to have him kill the dog rather than just make it as a, oh, look how evil he is moment, which it does also feel like, but
Mm-hmm.
I like to give him the benefit of the doubt and say maybe that's more like what they were going for, and it was an intentional sort of misdirection compared to the dog actually saving him at the end of the other movie.
Mm-hmm.
But Maybe I'm giving them too much credit. I don't know. You were making Shining references,
Mm-hmm.
which absolutely you can plaster all over this. But what do you think about the fact that, to my understanding, the real house is like more of a suburban type thing?
Mm-hmm.
Are you getting more Shining vibes the way they like in this the house feels like really isolated, like in a very overlooked kind of way?
Yeah, kinda. And I feel like maybe this just isn't how it is, but I feel like the house already looks creepy on the outset, and most people would nope out of it just how creepy it looks anyway.
Yeah.
I, I think it would have been more effective if you had the house be really pretty but have all that darkness to it.
Yeah. Yeah, because it was the whole thing where there's a chain of events that happened from the original Amityville movie that led to the title of Get Out, Jordan
Mm-hmm.
Peele's movie,
Mm-hmm.
where I think it was Richard Pryor did a bit on the original Amityville movie.
Mm-hmm.
Was talking about like how when you go into the house and you hear the phrase "get out," it's like that whole trope where it's like, why is the next scene not the family fleeing and the movie ends early?
Mm-hmm.
Because all the clues are there.
Do you know? Do you know who would survive every horror movie ever made? Philip Baker Hall's priest.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because that character is a major character in the original movie, and the scene where he goes in the house and the flies happen
Mm-hmm.
is one of the first scenes of the original movie.
Oh.
And then he gets the hell out and he calls her up and says, "Yeah, I was." She's like, "Why didn't you come to the house?" And he's like, "I was at the house." No.
That priest would survive a horror movie.
Yeah, because they really cut down Philip Baker Hall's screen time because Rod Steiger is that character in the original.
Mm-hmm.
And he's amazing in it. Like a lot of people thought he was way overdoing it, but I love Rod Steiger in the original movie because he's overdoing it.
And Philip Baker Hall is always so like reserved. Like I like Philip Baker Hall, but all of his characters just feel like very like friendly old guy.
Yeah, or authoritative old
Has there
guy.
ever been a movie where Philip Baker Hall's been a dick?
Paul Thomas Anderson movie.
Oh, okay. Well, if anybody was going to bring dick out of Philip Baker Hall, it's Paul Thomas Anderson.
Mr. Bookman from Seinfeld.
Oh, yeah.
He was the library cop.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't tell if I like it better or not that they cut his role down. Because I do like your take on it, where it's like he's kind of the embodiment of what everybody should do.
Yeah. The house says get out, and he's like, we missed the scene of him just going, okay, we just cut to him leaving.
Yeah, it's really like obviously the Rod Steiger incarnation is parodied by James Woods in Scary Movie 2,
Mm-hmm.
which seamlessly goes into an Exorcist reference. And I love that moment in Scary Movie 2 when James Woods first walks in and she
Mm-hmm.
spins her head around and he says, "Fuck this," and tries to leave. um,
How crazy is it that Scary Movie 2, if I remember correctly, I think it was Scary Movie 2, they damn near got Marlon Brando to do that.
yeah, the only thing that stopped him was he got sick.
Yeah.
And he was so close that he got to keep his paycheck legally. um, so I have opinions on a certain actor that I have voiced many times on this channel, and they are not popular opinions.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll ask you, what's your opinion on Ryan Reynolds in general and how he is here and how that contrasts with his usual image?
I think Ryan Reynolds, every character he plays for the most part has the same personality.
Yeah.
I don't know. I still enjoy his Deadpool. because of the shit going on around him, mainly.
I'll stand by the first Deadpool. Like I'll go ahead and get behind that, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the thing, is you say he's like all of his characters are the same for the most part, unless you take out like, this or Buried or the Voices or the Nines.
Mm-hmm. And I give him credit. He does try to do different things, like Barry, the Voices, whatever the other one was you mentioned. So I mean, at least he tries to branch out. Now I think he also plays the same character in most of his movies because I think that's his wheelhouse. I mean, he does play that kind of character well.
Yeah, I was gonna say we say that, and I've heard that, and that criticism is around, but 9 times out of 10, if you say that to somebody, they'll tell you that's why they love Ryan Reynolds. So all
Mm-hmm.
power to them, I guess.
I mean, you could say that about a lot of people. I mean, my favorite actor is Jack Nicholson. How many people have you heard say he just plays the same person every movie?
An annoying amount, and I try to defend it.
Mm-hmm. I'm
Defend
pretty
him.
sure people say the same thing about Robert Downey Jr.
The person who used to get it the most was Clooney.
Yeah, and then Clooney like spread his wings and flew, and now he'll probably go down as an all-time great.
So with that in mind, what do you think of Reynolds here?
I think it honestly makes it effective to watch a character like him that acts so much like Ryan Reynolds in the beginning go so dark. I think that adds to the effect of it.
Yeah, and I think my only complaint is, and this seems to be a problem with the story itself, because I felt the same way about Brolin in the original movie. So this is more of a fault of the story than anything this movie did wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Though the movie could have absolutely changed it, and tried, but
Mm-hmm.
still, as far as it also being you can tell in Brolin's performance as well, is that the change in George is so abrupt.
Mm-hmm.
Like it could be, I know making it slow burn would basically make him Jack Torrance, like in full, as if he isn't close to that already.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just so jarringly abrupt that it feels like it's kind of unearned
Mm-hmm.
when he's suddenly like off his rocker and like going against everything around him.
Mm-hmm.
But like the problem is that this movie is especially uninterested in build up,
Mm-hmm.
because the original movie is near 2 hours. This one doesn't even break an hour and a half, and it's in a big damn hurry to do the jump scare thing for most of the runtime.
Yeah.
Like something that's really effective in the original movie is we don't see the ghosts. It is the first big scare in the original movie is when she sees the red eyes out the window.
Mm-hmm.
Within the runtime of the original movie, it is about the entire runtime of this movie before the first big scare where she sees the eyes outside.
I think it would work more effective as a story where you're just not sure if he's just going crazy or if it's the house.
Yeah, and there's ways of doing that are not so subtle.
Mm-hmm.
This version bombards us with the ghost kids.
Mm-hmm.
Like it is a full-on assault for the whole runtime.
Mm-hmm.
And they are not interested in building up to scares whatsoever. It's all about the right now sudden scares. Do you think there's anything about that might work to its advantage?
For a movie like this, no.
It's like I'm trying to see things in like a positive way and trying to give them the benefit of the doubt in some way, but it's like that just this movie is so obnoxious. And that's not even like take the original movie out of the equation. Just look at it by itself. And it is still like one of the definitive jump scare factory movies that people over the years eventually turned on for the most part. It seems, but this was in there. This is what, 2005. So movies like this were like, this was just the thing you did in horror at this time.
Yeah.
But as far as like it holding up in that kind of style, I don't know. It's hard to find something that works in those particular scare scenes.
Yeah.
But I do think there's something that shows the potential of what this could have been if it might have been a bit more slow burn. We're coming back to Reynolds here. The performances are pretty strong, right?
I would say so, yeah.
And especially from the kids, which is very interesting to say, because a lot of times you can't say that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the times the kids are what kind of ruins a horror movie. But it's worth noting that we do have the introduction of Chloe Moretz in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how many people who haven't watched this movie recently remember that that's her. It's like the scene where she's on the roof
Mm-hmm.
is genuinely intense. And then it's immediately followed up by the scene when she said that she follows Jody because she's going to take her to her dad. And this is like a real performance. And she was, what, 8 when they shot this?
That
Like
sounds about right.
Like you could tell in that scene where she's explaining why she follows Jody that Chloe Moretz was going to be a big deal at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And another good scene with
she was just sitting there being groomed to be Jack Donaghy's nemesis.
Yeah. But then we also have Jimmy Bennett, who kind of has the usually thankless role of being the kid that cries.
Mm-hmm.
But I like that they hold off on that enough that he starts crying, and like there's been enough buildup at this point to where we actually really feel for the kids now. But obviously this wouldn't work if Reynolds' performance didn't entirely work. And I do think it does. I think he does the deterioration of George well.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's the scene when he and Billy are chopping wood.
Mm-hmm.
And we get a really serious sense that Billy's in genuine danger.
Mm-hmm.
Because he's just got the way he's done it with his appearance. I think it said like he wore contacts that were like black with a little bit of white to give that more possessed look.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think he found something here. But and like you were talking about with how it's the transition of him being very Ryan Reynolds-y.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's the moment in the middle where he's kind of in a middle ground when they're at the dinner table, and
Mm-hmm.
she's like, is this discipline or like punishment or torture? And he's like, I thought it was meatloaf.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a very Ryan Reynolds line, but we're in the moment where nobody's amused by him because they're terrified of him.
Yeah.
It's like I can do that. So I can handle that Ryan Reynolds being Ryan Reynolds. So God, that scene at the dinner table is like right out of Frailty or something.
Mm-hmm.
Another one about a murderous father with an axe.
Mm-hmm.
It's weird how prominent those movies are.
I also like some of his reactions to things, like after the Chloe Moretz situation, like he has gone above and beyond to help her, and he's so pissed off because she did something so stupid, and he sees her like hugging her mom, and his response is just, "What the fuck's wrong with you people?" or something like that.
Yeah. Like you can tell there's something off about him because he picks the wrong moments to be repulsed by.
Yeah.
It's like there's something there that's really good about doing like the almost possessed kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where just everything about him is just slightly off.
Mm-hmm.
There's even the moment when they go out to dinner and he goes back to normal because he's away from the house. And I
Same
like
when
how
they take him to the hospital.
yeah, and I like how when they go to dinner, they kind of sneak that line in there where he literally says, it's just a normal line of dialogue that literally anybody would say, yet he doesn't realize he's saying exactly what the issue is. Just very casually when he says, I think I just needed to get out of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's just a normal thing that people would say, but it's like, yes, that's exactly what the problem is. So I like that they kind of slip that in there so nonchalantly.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think overall it's done in by being a jump scare factory, because that seems to be most of what's up its sleeve.
Mm-hmm.
And would you say that's just poorly made on like the director's part and the producers that probably enforce that? Or do you chalk it up as more of just being a product of that mid 2000s era and it's
I think it's definitely a product of its era because a lot of people anymore don't have patience. Like, there's very few movies. Like, jump scare movies are ones that don't really have an effect on me. The ones that have an effect on me are the ones that just genuinely like creep you out. Like, I
yeah.
think those tend to stick with you a lot more. And I like movies that have the combination of both. The Conjuring is a great example of a combination of both. There's some jump scares in there, but there's also some general icky shit that sticks with you.
Yeah, I think what makes The Conjuring work so well in that regard too is it saves the jump scares.
Mm-hmm.
Like most of The Conjuring's big jump scares are all in the second half or later,
Mm-hmm.
like towards the end.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's stuff we talked about. I've talked recently about stuff like The Exorcist 3 or The Thing, where they're mostly non-jump scare, but they have like one or two big ones,
Mm-hmm.
but like only those.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, this is like when you called it the jump scare movie, it is basically its own subgenre almost. It feels like,
Mm-hmm.
and it's more often than not like paranormal movies.
Mm-hmm. See, I'm jumpy as it is, so like a jump scare movie like that, I don't enjoy. It just pisses me off.
Yeah, like it's just like we were saying, it's more obnoxious than anything else.
Yeah, it's like if I wanted to be like in a jump scare mood, I would just have Susan hide around the apartment and jump out at me and save myself $10.
Yeah,
Like
but there is
I
another.
I when I watch a horror, I want to be creeped out. Like I want to be like I want to have something that isn't going to jump out and scare me, but just makes me feel uneasy to be in that environment.
Yeah,
That's what I like to see out of a horror movie.
you haven't seen any of Ari Aster's movies yet, have you?
No,
Yeah, and you saw The Lighthouse, but you haven't seen The Witch.
no, Lighthouse is fucking bananas.
I'm very curious what you would think of The Witch or Hereditary or Midsummer. Hereditary and Midsummer are Ari Aster movies, and Robert Eggers, who did The Lighthouse, did The Witch.
Mm.
I'm curious what you think of those. I'm actually very curious what you would think of those.
I've had access to Midsummer through streaming for a while. I just never picked it.
It's pretty wild. I'd actually watch Hereditary first,
Mm-hmm.
and then like as soon as possible after Midsummer.
Mm.
So what else was I going to? Oh, what do you think about jump scare movies as far as being like an audience experience? Like,
If you,
does your opinion of jump scare like movies like this that are like constant jump scares? Do you
Mhm.
think they have a better impact from any viewer? Like if you were in a full theater that was really into it, and like every jump scare had everybody freaking out, would that be a decent experience for you, or would that just also be annoying?
I think if it was a fun atmosphere like that, it'd be a little bit different.
Yeah, because it'd be more
Like
like
it's kind
sort
of
of
like
like
whenever you watch a movie, like The most disappointing thing in the world to me is when you watch a comedy in a theater and it feels so funny because the whole theater is laughing. And then you get home and you watch it by yourself and you're like, man, I remember this being a lot funnier.
That's been the case with so many, and it
Mhm.
sucks.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, so it's one of those cases where like it's sort of like a haunted house attraction.
Hmm.
Or, like that's what a haunted house attraction is it's jump scares.
Yeah,
But
pretty
you're there
much. You
with like
walk
a
through
group.
this area and get jump scares all the time.
Yeah.
I don't do well with those either.
But at the same time, it's like when it's just like a singular experience, like if you're just watching with yourself or you're watching with like a group of like maybe 2 or 3 people, it just doesn't really have that effect.
No, it doesn't. And I mean, a haunted house plays out the same way. Like, if I was going to walk through a haunted house by myself, I'd be in hell. I don't particularly love to do it with groups, but it does make it more enjoyable.
I have a specific example actually.
Okay.
It might seem random, but it's just the first one that came to mind. I saw Scream 4 twice in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
Both times there was a lot of people in there.
Mm-hmm.
You were there for one of these.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the scene when Hayden Panettiere is driving them and they're at the stop sign, and before they go forward, there's the big jump scare of that car speeding by in front of her.
Mm-hmm.
Has nothing to do with anything. But both times in the theater, it got a big reaction. And it was so when I saw it the first time, I saw that. So when I saw it the second time with you, I eagerly anticipated that reaction.
Mm-hmm.
You watched Scream 4 at home? What the fuck was the point of that? That is the most worthless jump scare of all time. So it's weird how it has that different impact.
Do you know what I wish would have happened in that scene? I know this is not in any way possible, but I would love, after that car drives by, across their intersection is Ferris Bueller's dad, and he just goes,
It'd be the most unexpected.
I rewatched Ferris Bueller the other day, and I forgot how much I love Ferris's dad.
Yes.
He's one of the best parts of the movie, and he's barely there.
We must give all our love to Lyman Ward.
Yeah. Dude's great.
So, anything after that detour? Anything else on?
Well, we hadn't gone on a detour yet. We were due.
Yeah. Anything else in general on the 2005 Amityville?
No, I think the performances and everything's in the right place. I agree with you. I think they just relied too much on jump scares. Because if we could have slow burned it out a little more and let Ryan Reynolds more descend into that madness, which he did well with what he had already. I mean, we could have been talking about possibly a career-defining performance for Reynolds.
Yeah. And
I
so
mean,
I think the go-to example now seems to be Buried.
Mm-hmm.
And this was 5 years before Buried, so it's almost like he could have solidified that thing where people had this one particular like example where they could say, well, Ryan Reynolds can do this.
Mm-hmm.
So we know he's capable of bigger and better things.
Mm-hmm.
But then it took him like 5 more years to get to Buried and try again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I feel like the transition for Ryan Reynolds to being a serious actor is going to be very similar to what Jim Carrey's had to go through.
Yeah, and Jim Carrey even had his ups and downs trying to get that cred, because it's like for every Truman Show and Man on the Moon and Eternal Sunshine, there was like the Majestic, which.
But the way it works best though is the Truman Show, because we still got like the Carrey that we knew. There's just a little more of a dramatic bent on that movie than what's usually in his movies.
Yeah, and as far as transitioning from comedy to horror,
Mm-hmm.
I imagine there are a lot of people that will say that Ryan Reynolds' transition from comedy to this is much better than Carrie's transition from comedy to the number 23.
Yeah.
I can imagine most people will probably say that. And I don't know that I can disagree. So
Speaking of Carrie, yesterday I rewatched Bruce Almighty. The first time I've seen it in a while.
Phil Baker Hall.
Yeah. Yeah. Being a friendly old guy.
So and I think and obviously there's the whole thing where if you did it as more of a slow burn instead of the jump scare factory,
Mm-hmm.
you could probably get audiences to buy more into the true story thing.
Yeah.
But the
Plus,
fact that it's such,
I think this movie would work. I think you have to be careful with the slow burn because if you do slow burn it, you're going to get compared to The Shining a lot.
yeah, this story especially. That's what I was saying, where it's conflicting that George's transformation is so quick.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like it does make him different from Jack Torrance, which could potentially be a big problem
Yeah.
if he's too close. But the thing also is because they had already tried that, because obviously this was when Michael Bay, well, he's still doing it because he's like the producer on A Quiet Place, but when Michael Bay was like
Which
the
is
name on
so
all these
wild that Michael Bay, Mr. Explosions, is a producer on a movie called A Quiet Place.
But this was this area where
Everyone can branch out.
yeah, and this was that era where he started getting in charge of all those horror remakes. So see, this says from producer Michael Bay of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah.
Now, of course, this is not referring to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is referring to Jessica Biel's movie from 2003.
Mm-hmm. Which
also,
I will still defend.
yeah, but at the same time, that's the case of them being really cheap in regards to the true story thing, where it was, I mean, this was an interesting approach, but the idea that, yes, obviously, would you say Texas Chainsaw is mainly to blame? The original Texas Chainsaw is mainly to blame for the trend of let's try to convince people that these horror movies are true stories. Because, of course, when you say Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a true story, people don't think of Ed Gein. They assume that Leatherface was real.
Yeah.
So
I would think you'd have to put the blame on Texas Chainsaw, yeah.
And then they doubled down on that for the 2003 Jessica Biel movie by coming up with their own real identity for Leatherface, and like did that documentary thing at the beginning and end.
Mm-hmm.
Which is an interesting approach, but once again, it's so cheap when you're luring audiences in with the true story thing. But at the same time, if audiences can still buy that, that's probably more on them. Like the producers are just saying, these people will buy it, we'll do it.
That's your example was Scream 4. My example for a movie that I watched in a packed theater that it was fun when the audience reacted was the Jessica Biel Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, I remember it being like huge when it was out.
Mm-hmm. And I watched it in a packed theater, and it was really fun watching it in a packed theater. That might be why I still have a soft spot for it.
Yeah, that's very likely. So, do we move on to The Omen?
Yeah, I think it's time to move on.
A remake that was the following year, 2006, that's not so much of a jump scare. There's a couple of very annoying, pointless jump scares in it, but far from a jump scare factory, interestingly enough.
I wonder how long they had the plan in place to make that and release it on 666.
I'd say at least a few years in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe it started brewing in 2003 or something.
Oh man, the producers have been so pissed if this year happened then and they had to close down the theater and it didn't get to come out on 666. They probably would have just thrown it on demand or something on 666.
Because that was such a big part of the marketing.
Yeah.
That was like the main selling point.
Mm-hmm. That's like whenever you're trying to think of like release dates of movies, that one's always going to be easy.
Yeah. So as far as being a remake goes, this one has an advantage.
What's that?
This one has a huge advantage. It's the same writer.
Yeah.
Dude just remade his own screenplay.
Mm-hmm.
Which, yeah, it's when you're comparing Amityville to Amityville and the Omen to the Omen, this is very close to the original.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like the events go, the execution, in some cases, literally, can be quite different.
I was going to ask you if the original Omen had as many jump scares as this does.
Not that I remember, but the thing about that though that's very interesting is that Richard Donner made the original one.
Yeah.
And this Omen is full-blown horror movie.
Mm-hmm.
Richard Donner's intent, if I remember correctly, was to not make it so much like going full on into the Satan thing, but making it almost seem ambiguous.
Mm.
Like what you were talking about with the idea of how they could have been more ambiguous with Amityville, and it's like, is it just the house, or is it something a bit more real going on, or what? And it's like he wanted to make it more like the religious stuff was looming, but it could all just be like everything's is exaggerated to them, it seems like, when it's actually just a normal case of whatever's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So he wanted to like kind of downplay it and make it not as like literal. But this one's pretty straightforward, right?
It's funny too with rewatching Bruce Almighty yesterday. Yesterday is also when I watched The Omen. Now I want to see Damien battle Morgan Freeman.
What an interesting choice of two movies to watch together, close together. I do like the effect in the opening. I mean, it's kind of cheap, but I still really like it. The opening credits where the O's turn to sixes and the T's turn to crosses.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I just like that. Like it's simple, it's obvious, but I dig it. What do you? I guess right off, what do you think about the cast?
It's very interesting.
Yeah, because Julia
Like,
Stiles.
Is this the first time? Go ahead. You were going to talk about Julia Stiles, so we'll start there.
Julia Stiles is an actress that I've never minded.
Mm-hmm.
Like if she's in something, it'll be like, all right.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think she's ever like stood out in any big way.
Mm-hmm.
Weirdly enough, the closest she's probably ever come is 10 Things I Hate About You.
Mm-hmm.
unless we have some Save Last Dance fans out there, but
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, she does just kind of seem like she's kind of there. Like she doesn't do anything wrong as an actress. It's not that she's unengaging. She's just kind of there.
Mm-hmm.
And Liev Schreiber has some big shoes to fill, filling in for Gregory Peck.
Yeah.
I mean,
was
you could
this,
say
was this Liev Schreiber's first like leading role kind of thing?
I feel like, unless there's something smaller we're not thinking of right away, I want to at least something this big, like this mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
That might be the case. Because obviously he was mainly known for horror because he's Cotton Weary.
Yeah.
But now we're dealing with a different kind of horror.
And he's done remakes because he was in The Manchurian Candidate.
Yeah, very close to this.
Mm-hmm.
So then we have.
I would dare say that Liev Schreiber is one of the only good things about X-Men Origins Wolverine.
Yeah. Do you think? I'm a really big Liev Schreiber fan.
You should be.
I am.
The dude's
me,
good.
I am.
Everybody keeps telling me to check out Ray Donovan.
Yeah, I watched a season of it and was pretty into it, but I'm touch and go when it comes to TV series in general, so that's nothing. The fact that I didn't continue says nothing about its quality.
Mm.
Do you think I would say, is he a tad wooden in this? But this is a hard part to gauge what exactly the role asks for, because Gregory Peck was pretty much the perfect choice of just put him in the role and it works.
Mhm.
Because the Pierce Brosnan was considered. And I feel like he kind of falls in that Gregory Peck mode of just put it. Just, if you just put him in the part, he has the kind of presence that probably would have suited it enough.
Dude, I will defend this to the death. I think Pierce Brosnan's very underrated as an actor.
Yeah. I mean, like, I don't know anybody that dislikes him, but he is like a very good actor, especially when you look at stuff like The Matador, especially.
Mm-hmm.
And like we were talking about, I do think he just has the presence for a role where he could have done this probably with not much effort. He could have pulled this role off.
Yeah. And I'm still on the train that, God, I would have loved to see Pierce Brosnan play Cable.
Yeah. But so what do you think
plus,
about
I know he doesn't have the best Bond movies, but I've always enjoyed his interpretation of Bond.
Yeah. Oh, there's a whole 2.5 hour video we did on that.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about Leo Schreiber in this role in particular?
I agree with you. It's kind of a hard role to gauge what you want out of it, because you want him to be skeptical and kind of come around to it later, because Julia Stiles is off in the land of he's evil, everything he does is fucking weird. And then Leo Schreiber is kind of like how a real person would approach it. And they'd be like, he's just a kid. Kids are weird anyway. You know, it's not as weird as it looks.
Yeah, because Julia Stiles being that way actually gives a complexity to her character, because you would think if anybody was going to not to be in denial that the kid is evil, it would be the mother, especially since we build up in the opening scene. This is basically all she's ever wanted in her life as a child, to the point that he went to the extreme to do what he did, and he set the whole events of the movie off.
Yeah.
And she has to be that, but yet believably turn to, I believe this wholeheartedly.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with the character of Robert, you don't really have that level of complexity. It's still there for sure, because he still does have that attachment, but not the attachment that, say, a mother would have. Though we do have scenes where, like when the nanny hangs herself, it's Robert that goes and retrieves Damien.
Mm-hmm.
So there are moments throughout like that, but it's not as blatant, I guess you could say. See, I would just think that's kind of would be kind of a hard part to play if you don't have the, and this is nothing against Leo Schreiber, because we know what Leo Schreiber is capable of, but we're talking about Gregory Peck levels. That's a hard level for any actor to reach.
Yeah.
That's why Jeff Daniels on stage is so far the only person that's tried to tackle Atticus Finch again. And it took
my biggest regret is that I was in New York while that was going on, and I did not go watch it. That's one of my biggest regrets.
And there's another moment in this, like in Amityville.
Mm-hmm.
Remember when I was talking about the line when he says, I just need to get out of the house. And that's something anybody would say.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it's the kind of cute thing a new mother would say when she sees her baby for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
How ominous is it? How ominous is it that when she sees Damien for the first time as a baby, in that way you normally would, she says, "Who's that?" It's like you would say that because you're like, "Oh, that's my newborn baby. That's the baby that just came out of me. Oh, who's that? I know who that is." Is now, who is that? Yes, because that is not your baby, and it came from the depths of hell. Mm-hmm. Your first question should absolutely be, who the fuck is that?
Yeah.
So I love the way the line works in both cases.
If I remember right, I just watched it last night, but I don't remember. If I remember right, Leo Schreiber kind of gives a look like, oh shit, I'm already found out. Oh man, if he had just, I mean, this is cruel, but I mean, if he had just, like, she had said that and in shock, he just dropped it.
We could roll the credits.
Or if he wasn't brave enough to go through with it, she was like, "Who is that? Oh crap, wrong kid." Roll credits.
And we're taking out the whole dagger thing here, of course, but just for comedic effect. But we'll run with it.
Mm-hmm.
But then, yes, obviously, very quickly things start to escalate. And this is a kind of case where, unlike Amityville, I've always liked it because the original's this way too. Just how quickly things do escalate.
Mm-hmm. Insert Ron Burgundy gif here.
Yeah, because we roll through his growing into infant to child pretty quickly,
Mm-hmm.
and then just literally all hell starts to break loose.
I like it because I think there would be a temptation to like show him growing up, but if it's not important to the story, then yeah, skip it.
Yeah, because there's also the case of
That's like my biggest beef is I've seen a lot of people where they're like, "Oh, so you mean the previous 11 years?" Like if somebody went from a baby to 12 and they're like, "Oh, so the previous 11 years just weren't important." Well, apparently fucking not, because we skipped them.
It's like it was a childhood. Have you lived a childhood? Then you know what happened.
Yeah.
So when stuff starts to go down, I think I actually like the way it might seem a bit much.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, the way this movie, the 2006 movie pulls off the use of sound really stands out to me. Like, and like I said, it might seem a bit too much or over the top or silly, but when the explosion happens at the beginning, when their friend gets blown up in the car and all that.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what he is. I've seen both movies multiple times, and now
He's some kind of ambassador, and Leah Schreiber is like his deputy.
yeah.
You're my favorite deputy.
But when that explosion happens and we're fading to black,
Mm-hmm.
there's that growling noise.
Mm-hmm.
This literally feels like it's coming from another world. Like I can see where that might seem like a bit much, but I just like that for some reason. It's creepy as hell, I think.
Mm-hmm.
We hear this, and I think there's a scene with Pete Postlethwaite also, probably right before his death, where we kind of just hear that like off screen in the distance,
Mm-hmm.
and to feel like it's like coming from anywhere.
I think it's kind of, yeah, a lot of it's kind of cheesy, but I also kind of love the whole Final Destination vibe you get from the deaths.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun.
Yeah, because it even Final Destination 3 especially really takes that approach of the means of death are visible in pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's the whole thing where, well, first off, I love how well shot this is. Because that's something that horror, like these kind of remakes tend to phone in. Like the 2005 Amityville
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really particularly stand out in any way as far as how it's shot.
True.
They even all had, like, a lot of those even had like that similar look to them,
Mm-hmm.
that aesthetic. But this one actually some effort put into how well it was shot, especially with the use of like how much the colors pop in this. Because I remember the original kind of having a bit of a dreary look to it, but it makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
like tonally, for it to look dreary. But I feel like they still made this
especially when
more.
you know that the ending is not a happy ending.
Oh, but both this and the original are relentlessly bleak. Holy shit.
Mm-hmm.
The Omen in general is a relentlessly bleak story. But the thing is like the colors in this like really stand out and popping away. And of course, they eventually bring snow into it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've talked about so many times, I fucking love what snow looks like on a movie screen. I never get tired of it. And this one does it really well too.
Mm-hmm. I know there's a lot of people that don't like movies that are so bleak and dreary. But at the same time, you know, I respect a movie that does that because you know what? In real life, 9 times out of 10, evil wins.
Yeah. Then there's actually a lot of people think there's not enough movies like that, but when you go to enough places, like especially in the indie department, you can find movies with bleak endings everywhere, and you get tired of it, and you start to love happy endings again.
I feel like Indieland is like that, and I feel like a lot of the 70s was like that.
Yeah. There's and I actually say that even about like as far as it being well shot, even about the scenes I don't particularly care for that are just pointless, like Stiles' dream sequence where the first big jump scare is, where he's like she's in the bathtub and he's like wearing the mask and shit.
Mm-hmm.
That's clearly for the crowd we were talking about when we were talking about Amityville, where you have the big crowd and everybody just reacts to jump scares, and that's the kind of people that go to this kind of movie because that's what they're here for.
Yeah.
That scene is for those people and no other reason.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yeah, it could be ominous or foreshadowing or her kind of starting to see what's really going on, but the movie accomplishes that without that 20-second scene.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about how strong... We talked about how the 2005 Amityville has surprisingly strong performances in it, like across the board.
Mm-hmm.
This one, not only you could probably say that about, but the cast in this one is really strong.
Mm-hmm.
When you're like Julia Stiles and Liv Schreiber as the leads, in 2006, you're probably thinking, all right, okay. But then you've got Mia Farrow as Mrs. Baylock, which is brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
You got what, David Thewlis, Pete Postlethwaite, and Michael Gambon at least.
Mm-hmm.
For obviously, it's everybody knows it, but I mean, we'd be remiss if we didn't go ahead and mention, yes, surely Mia Farrow's casting is just a giant in joke, right?
I would think so.
Since she mothered Satan's baby and Rosemary's Baby,
Mm-hmm.
which I may or may not talk about before the month's over. But
And let's not overlook David Thewlis tackling dark arts.
of course,
There's a couple Hogwarts professors that had to get involved.
Yeah.
And one of the popes at the beginning of the movie runs one of the other wizarding schools too. So we had to get 3 people from Harry Potter world here.
That's the kind of magic this is going to take.
Yeah.
The kind of power this is going to take.
Yeah.
What do you think? Because obviously he was an incredible actor. And we talked about Rod Steiger in the original Amityville going so far over the top is why I liked that performance. What do you think of what Pete Postlethwaite brings to the table?
What's the matter?
Well, before he becomes a Kobayashi kebab,
Mm-hmm.
that's your joke.
Mm-hmm.
I have to give you credit for that.
Mm-hmm.
There is a scene. Usually I hate this, but I totally understood it in this context. Going back to the theater experience.
Mm-hmm.
You were with me when I saw this in the theater. And I don't know if you remember,
Mm-hmm.
but there were quite a few people in there, and specifically there was a row of girls right behind us. And there's probably like 6 of them.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a scene with Postlethwaite that had those girls cackling. That wasn't meant to be funny. Like I said, normally I would hate that.
Is it when he says its mother like 4 times?
I think what did it in, because when I was rewatching it, I was like, let's see if I can see what makes that so funny.
Yeah.
And I
well,
realized
I won't lie, Susan kind of laughed at it too.
I think it's because not only is it that whole thing of repetition just gets funny after a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's Schreiber's saying the same sentence over and over again, and Postlethwaite's like cutting down his sentence each time. And it's the way it keeps cutting back and forth.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know if that scene got the desired effect. It's like when people laugh at that scene, I get it. And that I may or may not do it myself these days. But as far as the rest of his performance goes, I do love his commitment to you do get a sense of extreme urgency in his
Mhm.
performance that I think very much sets up the stakes here.
And I think he does it well too, where he comes across that it's so urgent, but he's also so manic that it'd be very easy to dismiss him as insane.
Yeah. And that sort of duality, I guess you could say, also kind of comes in with Mia Farrow, because the character of Mrs. Baylock has always been very interesting. And here it's a case of the way she's able to play up like she's this sort of, like she's like the soft-spoken nanny that knows exactly how to handle the situations and might know the kid even better than his own parents. And usually there's like a softness that comes with that kind of role, or a warmth, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm.
Would you say that's here, or do you just have the constant feel that Mrs. Baylock is fucked up?
I
But it,
I
it
don't know how Mrs. Baylock kept her job for so long.
yeah, because it's like the fact that it is so obvious that she's like in this,
Mm-hmm.
does that not make the character more enjoyable?
Yeah.
And it gives an actress like Farrow more to work with. It's like, oh, we don't have to do any build up here. I can just be fucking crazy the whole time. But because my just general demeanor and the way I smile is enough for the character, then that's just what we're gonna run with. Gambon's not really here long enough to make much of an impact. The only thing that stands out, I think, about Gambon is that when they first run into him, the first thing he basically says is Brennan dead yet?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, he died pretty good. It's like, oh, good, we can get started.
What do you think of the deaths in this movie?
Ooh, I got something to say about Thulis.
Like, I mean, like, do you think that they're creative?
You know, it's like you said, there are, I mean, it is kind of in the shadow of being post Final Destination, and for that matter, post Final Destination 2.
Mm-hmm.
But I still think for a movie, because obviously that's the way the deaths go in the original as well, just not as graphic.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, David Warner plays the role that David Thewlis does here, and the decapitation in that is still pretty graphic, if I remember correctly.
Oh
'Cause it's
man,
like,
David Warner to David Thewlis. That's good casting there.
yeah. With David Warner, I believe it was a pane of glass.
Mm.
But yeah, they went full fucking Final Destination for David Thewlis.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing: is it is pretty wicked, if pretty CGI heavy,
Mm-hmm.
when David Thewlis loses it. It's very Owen Wilson in The Haunting.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that fucks me up is the way his body falls.
Mm-hmm.
How it just goes like instantly lifeless. I don't give a fuck that he got decapitated. The thing that creeps me the hell out is the way his body falls.
Yeah.
It's like you decapitate him in all the different ways you want to. That body dropping is so fucking weird. And I don't like it at all, and that's a compliment.
What about the Kobayashi kebab?
That's pretty. The addition of the glass is new. That's pretty wicked.
I think that one comes off less like Final Destination because where it's kicked off by a lightning strike, it feels more deliberate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the really extreme case of the whole thing of somebody that sins gets struck by lightning.
Are you referring to Beavis and Butthead?
That's one example, yeah.
I watched that yesterday too.
So, but then
We're gonna do a video at some point where we talk about Beavis and Butthead.
Yeah, probably soon, like probably next month, right? Once we're done.
Because when I rewatched it yesterday, there was still stuff that made me laugh out loud that I was like, I want to talk about this.
Oh, while we're on the subject of deaths, before we move on plot-wise, something interesting about Donner's approach to the original movie. Now, I said he was trying to do something more downplayed and not as literal about the stuff that's going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Mrs. Baylock's death being that he plows into her with the car. That was going to be her death in the original movie. And Donner changed it because he thought it was excessive.
So how does she die in the original movie?
I think, God, I remember that movie so vividly when I watch it and now remembering it. I want to say he stabs her, I think. But
what do you think of going into the death? What do you think of Julia Stiles' death?
Yeah, I think hers is, what's interesting about what I just said is I think hers is a bit more elaborate in the original movie. I think she gets shoved out a window or something. But yeah, the whole thing of her falling, I love the way that her fall is shot.
Yeah.
And then when she just goes in there and like just quietly like just sort of puts her down, it's like it's so, I think that's eerier. It's more Mrs. Baylock like that it's so downplayed the way she kills her and can just walk out.
Yeah.
Hand in hand with Damien, no less.
After actually saying the sentence, I'll just park him right here. I don't know why it just cracks me up that she refers to it as parking him. Like he's a fucking convertible.
And then the fact that obviously Mrs. Baylock is somebody to be feared, but the fact that her line to Robert is "Don't let him kill me," and it's like her death doesn't come directly from the hand she thinks it does. I mean, you could say Damien indirectly killed her by putting her there.
Yeah.
And they're all it's all kind of one force working here anyway. I mean, Mrs. Baylock, Damien, is there much of a difference whose hand you die by?
No.
So, but then when we get closer to the end, like I said, this is when like the cinematography really stands out, when like the snow comes into it and the way the graveyard is shot. The graveyard, I think the graveyard scene is creepier in the original movie because of just the dreary and dark way. Like it just looks so ominous. But I think Snow works in its own way. Because we still do get dark stuff here. I do like when they go see
when they go see Spoleto, who's just sitting out in the snow by himself wearing his Mason Burger face.
Yes. And this is where I
appreciate... That one's your joke.
Yeah. And this is where I appreciate it on a visual level is, yeah, you watch the original movie and he's got just like half of his face is burned.
But he looks more like the nun that they talk to find out where he is.
Yeah. But then when you have him not just looking completely, he looks inhuman.
He looks like when he first shows up and he's like sitting there and he has his hood and he's sitting out in his wheelchair. My first thought was, honestly, when I watched it yesterday, I was like, oh, they went to see Palpatine. Does he not give you Palpatine vibes at first?
He makes Palpatine look like Clooney. But I love that though, because it's like, even if it seems outlandish, like having him look like that, be right in the middle here with the snow falling, I just appreciate that on a visual level. Because like that's a lot of what storytelling in movies is tell the story, do this mundane thing where you go to him and he says go here. Tell that in the most visually satisfying way possible. And I thought this movie really pulled that scene off especially. There's so many scenes in this movie that feel huge by like the set design and the way they're shot.
One I was going to ask you about, we'll have to go backwards a little bit. What do you think of the zoo scene?
I do think it was creepier before because it wasn't as like, I don't know. I'll collect this thought. Where were you? Are you going somewhere with that?
I'm thinking. Well, first of all, the gorilla is definitely a man in a costume. But I think would have been more effective would have been something like Aquaman, only in reverse, where when Aquaman shows up and all the fish gather to him, instead of the animals making noise and getting scared, I think it'd be more effective if it showed the animals just gone, like in hiding.
Oh yeah.
Like somebody looks back, they're like, where are all the animals? And Damien's just standing there in the middle, and any animal that's in eyesight of him is gone.
Yeah, or just lingering and looking terrified.
Mm-hmm.
But it is interesting, like, to think about the chaos that
Mm-hmm.
ensues, because it also kind of has that same vibe when they drive by the church, and he like starts to, if I like in this one he like just kind of tenses up, if I remember correctly. In the original he has like a full blown meltdown,
Mm-hmm.
and it's
So in the first one, when they just drive by it, he has the reaction he has when they try to go to that ceremony in the remake. What I think is funny too, like the way it cracks me up, is whenever Damien walks into the zoo, he walks in there with such fucking purpose. Like he's got his little hat and his little tie, and the dude's just like walking like he's on a mission.
Yeah, that's where we kind of glossed over this. What do you think about this kid that plays Damien?
To me, he's kind of like people's complaint with Nicholson in The Shining. Going back to that reference, that kid already looks 7 flavors of creepy.
Yeah, the original one did too, so I'm wondering if who has a cameo in this, by the way.
Doing what?
Huh?
Doing what?
I think he's a reporter after the nanny hangs herself.
Oh, okay.
He's definitely a reporter. I can't remember if I'm confused on the scene or not. But so I almost think like that's probably the idea, because I do think he has some early interactions with Julia Stiles, like when he hides from her to play like a game and she freaks out.
Mm-hmm.
He seems rather kid-like. The only thing is just the fact that his face is so pale is the dead giveaway.
I do like too where he comes across as a kid where like he hides behind a tree and jumps out and yells boo, and then when she's actually scared, his response is, "I didn't mean to scare you." That's such like a little kid thing.
It's like, Damien, do you know what jumping out from behind a tree and saying boo is?
And he just looks at you straight faced and just, I only know death. Actually, he doesn't say anything. The kid actually, about halfway through the movie, I don't think he has any more lines. Once it's like, when is the drop off? Is it after that scene that he doesn't have another line except for screaming?
It's possible.
Yeah, I can't think of any lines that he has a few, like, oh, the zoo. He says, she asks why the other kids don't want to play with him. He says they're afraid. But I think you can count the amount of lines that Damien has in this movie on one hand.
Yeah, I was trying to remember if he said anything when he got woken up at the end, before he took him to the church.
No, he just spends the rest of that screaming until they're at the church, and he's just like, "No, Daddy."
Oh yeah.
I think his lines are literally boo. I didn't mean to. Did I scare you? I didn't mean to. They're scared. No, Daddy, and screaming. That might be the extent of his lines.
Do you think it's a positive that for a while he comes off less evil and more just bratty?
Yeah.
Because I do love, because it should be, you should probably think you should be afraid of him, but it just comes off like more of a bratty thing. But yet for some reason I still love it. It's when he's playing his like game really loudly and Julia Stiles wants him out of the room now.
Mm-hmm.
And as Mrs. Baylock is escorting him out, he just gives her like that squinted look.
Susan, last night when we were watching it, she said, "I can't believe I'm saying about a kid, but that kid has such a hittable face."
I don't know. Even though it's more bratty and less evil, I still love that look. Because it's less I'm gonna kill you and more fuck you.
Yeah. So what do you like? Here's a good basis of comparison. We talked earlier about Ryan Reynolds' descent into madness. What do you think of Julia Stiles' descent into like paranoia and fear and just overall bitterness?
Yeah. It's almost like she somehow inherently knows that this kid is not actually a part of her.
Hmm. Like the scene you were talking about with the video game. Like, that's just straight up bitterness. She easily could have left the room and let him keep doing what he was doing. And Liev Schreiber even points that out. Like, he walks in the room and she was like, he just keeps making that noise. And he's like, he's sitting here quietly playing. He's not doing anything wrong.
Yeah, it's like we were saying, how I think what she does so well is the contrast of this is the character that normally would be in denial that Damien was any kind of evil at all.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like the first one that crosses over.
Not only that, but you had mentioned earlier in the movie, like for her, all she wants to do is have a child and be a mom. Later in the movie, she gets pregnant again, and her first response is, "Yeah, I'm not having that child.
Yeah.
It's gone. Like, I'm getting rid of it today."
Yeah, we do have to point out the humorously insensitive like nurse after she's had the fall.
Mm-hmm.
And Leah Stryver comes in and she's like, oh my God, there's internal bleeding, But she's like, oh yeah, we're gonna keep an eye on that. And he's like, yeah, but she's pregnant. The nurse's response is, I'm afraid not. Like, geez.
Yeah, I think that was a little. I don't think that's how that conversation would go in real life. There's a little more bedside manner than that, especially with somebody that's lost a child during pregnancy.
Maybe it was the very end of her shift and she'd been there all night.
Maybe.
And she was just in full go fuck yourself mode.
Or maybe it was one of those things where she listed off all those injuries and he's like, she's pregnant. And she's like, does this motherfucker really think the baby lived?
Yeah. Or maybe Julia Stiles got the point and she was like, oh, thank God I lost that baby. Because I didn't want it at all. It could have been evil like my current one. And so by the time she reaches Robert, it's like, oh yeah, I thought we were under the impression that's not a big deal.
Yeah.
These are dark ass jokes. We should probably end this soon before we go to hell.
Probably. We'll get the Beavis and Butthead lightning strike.
We'll be hanging out in Damnation with Pete Postlethwaite.
Yeah.
That is kind of creepy too when he says, you and I, Robert, we will spend eternal damnation together. And it's like, holy shit, that probably actually happened.
Normally I would be a little off put by the fact that it's revealed that Pete Postlethwaite's body is like riddled with cancer. But in his case, I think it does add to the tragedy that he couldn't accomplish what he wanted to before he died.
Yeah.
Like when Thorne walks away after that conversation under the bridge, and you just see the defeat on him, like, I couldn't do what I set out to do.
Yeah.
It does make you kind of feel for him.
Yeah, because he was anticipating his death regardless.
Yeah, he knew it was coming.
He didn't know it was going to go fucking Final Destination on him. But...
Oh my God. I'm getting to make this reference and I love it. When he gets skewered through the ground, James Franco's up there yelling, "You knew this was coming, Pete."
Oh God. A character who also died by impalement. No less. Oh God.
I love when I can reference Harry Osborn lines.
All right, so
and then
so
I haven't seen the original Omen. Is the ending sequence pretty much the same thing? Like, does Gregor Peck go like death by cop?
Yes.
Okay.
And it ends exactly the same way with the funeral scene and the smile into the camera.
Oh. And holding the president's hand.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, and then he goes to military school, and then he goes into Sam Neill.
Ah.
Those are those are two movies for another time that are kind of guilty pleasures of mine, actually. So,
Oh, so you're a fan of the Omen series?
yeah, I think there was a straight to video one also, but I don't know anything about it.
Do you know what I'm actually waiting for? Seeing how Hollywood is doing things these days. And I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of be here for it. I'm surprised no one's tackled a Mrs. Baylock movie, like a prequel type thing.
Oh man, whoever would get that role would hit the lottery.
Unless it's like one of those things where, like, I don't know, I could see that going really badly though too.
Well, it's not Disney, so they won't try to make her sympathetic. They could go all out if they want to.
Who would you, if they were going to do that? Let's say they were going to do that today. They were going to make a prequel about Mrs. Baylock. Who would you cast?
Oh, Jesus.
Because I know who I would cast, and it's probably a little unconventional, but I'd love to see what she'd do with it.
Who's that?
I would cast Michelle Williams.
Oh, yeah. It would have kind of hints of her performance at the end of Shutter Island.
Mm-hmm.
Because she can play crazy. She doesn't often, but when she does, she can play the fuck out of crazy.
Yeah, I would cast Michelle Williams.
Yeah, just don't. I haven't watched it yet, so I guess I can't say for sure. But I saw a trailer, and I can't deal with Ryan Murphy's Nurse Ratched thing. It's a cool idea on paper, but
Mm-hmm.
he looks like he Ryan Murphy'd the fuck out of it. So I'd have to hope it wasn't something like that.
Yeah.
Because my first thought was like Sarah Paulson. I was like, am I just thinking that because Sarah Paulson's doing a prequel character right now that's known for being rather evil? Probably.
So were you hoping it'd be something more along the lines of like Bates Motel?
Yeah. Oh, Vera Farmiga, there's one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's my choice. Vera Farmiga's my choice. I don't care if she already played Norma Bates.
Oh, okay. So in a Baylock prequel, you would pick Vera Farmiga and I would pick Michelle Williams.
Yeah, like, it sounds like I'm just saying that offhand, but the more it's in my mind now, the more I love the idea.
I'm gonna stick with Michelle Williams because I feel like Michelle Williams could put on that politeness. Like I feel like Michelle Williams playing Mrs. Baylock would look like. I think it would look like how she plays the end of Shutter Island with some of her Glinda the Good Witch sprinkled in.
Yeah, it'd be like her Glinda, but with like a weird sort of like underlying. You get the sense that something's off.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, so as far as these two go, I think it's pretty clear that I prefer The Omen, and I think it's a better adaptation of its material, which of course has the upper hand because that's the same writer, but still also the way they like took the visual approach and made it feel so big and like told the story in that way.
There is, for a horror movie, there is a lot of visual storytelling.
Yeah. And it's not a full-on jump scare factory is always a plus.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to come away from this making it sound like I hate the 2005 Amityville, because I don't. I don't know how convincing
you
that
don't
was.
look too sure.
No, there's a lot of potential there, and I think the performances help a lot, and some of the new choices are interesting, but I do think as far as remakes go, The Omen made a lot more interesting choices,
Mm-hmm.
while at the same time, interestingly enough, not changing a lot and not changing anything at all story wise.
Mm-hmm.
So
It's almost like it's the same story, just somebody. It's literally like somebody else telling a different story. It's not because it's the same writer, but it's like the writer told the story to two different people, and this is how they told it to someone else.
Yeah, sort of like
Like they
how
get
you
the core of it right, but the details are a little different.
it's sort of like when you read a book that they make a movie into, and there's what the book looked like in your head versus what the movie adaptation looked like, and how many differences there are despite being the same story.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and I guess we're done here. The next one is, I believe, a movie we've referenced many times in this very video. And yeah, and then after that, we're going to tackle a trilogy, and then after that, we're going to do a list. And I've got plenty of the verses and reviews and all that stuff that's going to be hanging around throughout this month. Almost all horror. There's one day, my birthday of all days, is going to be a regular movie review because that's when the Trial of Chicago 7 comes out. But everything else that's not the Trial of Chicago 7 that we talk about this entire month will be horror. So, as I'm sure you've probably got that vibe already with all the stuff that's already been posted, and we are just continuing that. So, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think we covered it.
All right, then I guess that's it.